Hey everyone, if you're gearing up for your regulatory science exam, you've landed in the absolute perfect spot. Today, we're tackling OECD Guideline 442A. Now look, I know regulatory guidelines can kind of feel like a thick, impenetrable forest of technical jargon, but I promise you, once we break it down visually, it's going to click right into place. This explainer gives you the exact blueprint you need to not just pass, but absolutely nail the local lymph node assay, specifically the DA variant. So let's get focused and dive right in.
Here's a quick look at our game plan for this explainer. We'll start with the baseline problem. Look closely at our test organism, run through a lab simulation, figure out how to actually interpret those results, and wrap up with some key takeaways you'll definitely want for the test.
All right, section 1. Let's talk about the baseline problem.
You know, in regulatory science, you really have to understand the why before you can grasp the how. To truly get 442A, we've got to compare it to the old ways of doing things. Back in the day, scientists leaned heavily on Guideline 406, which used guinea pigs. The issue? It relied on challenge-induced allergic reactions. That caused a lot of pain and distress for the animals, which we obviously want to avoid. Then came the original Local Lymph Node Assay, TG429. Great step forward, sure, but it relied on radioactive isotopes to measure cell proliferation. So suddenly, you're dealing with massive occupational exposure risks and radioactive waste disposal. It was a whole headache. Enter our hero, TG442A. By the way, the ADA stands for Dicell Chemical Industries. They developed this specific tweak. It completely solves both problems. It refines animal welfare by ditching those painful challenge phases, and it uses totally non-radioactive bioluminescence to measure cell growth. It is, honestly, a massive win for both lab safety and the animals.
Moving right along to section 2, the actual test organism we use.
Okay, grab your pens and circle this part in your notes because you absolutely have to know the precise demographics of the mice used here. The entire validity of the assay hinges on this. Validation studies were done exclusively with the CBA/J strain mouse. That's our gold standard. You need young adult females that are nulliparous, meaning they've never given birth and they can't be pregnant. Age is strictly capped, literally exactly, between 8 to 12 weeks old when the study starts. And here's a detail professors love to test on. The weight variation of these mice cannot exceed 20% of the mean weight. Why so strict? Well, metabolic consistency is absolutely crucial for getting accurate bioluminescence readings later on.
But hold on, we can't just jump in and start slathering our main chemical on these mice. We need to find the right dosage first. So, before the main study, a pre-screen test is totally mandatory if you don't already have toxicity data. Think of it kind of like the Goldilocks phase. You're hunting for that highest possible concentration that maximizes exposure, but, and this is a big but, it can't be so strong that it causes systemic toxicity like lethargy or changes in breathing. Oh, and it definitely can't cause excessive local skin irritation either.
So that begs the question, what exactly counts as excessive local irritation? When this pops up on your exam, picture this exact table for scoring erythema, which is just a fancy word for skin redness. You're looking right at the mouse's ears. A score of 0 means no redness at all, and it scales all the way up to a 4, which is severe beet redness and actual tissue damage. Now, here is the critical limit to burn into your memory. If you hit an erythema score of 3 or higher, or if you measure a 25% increase in ear thickness using your micrometer, the irritation is officially too severe. If that happens, you have to drop down to the next lower dose for your main study. No exceptions.
All right, let's head into section 3. It's time for the lab simulation. Okay, go ahead and mentally put on your lab coats because we're going to walk through the exact 8-day protocol as if you're standing at the bench holding the pipettes yourself. Visualizing this timeline is the absolute best way to memorize it. On day 1, you pre-treat the dorsum, the back, of the mouse's ear with a 1% sodium lauryl sulfate aqueous solution. Then, exactly 1 hour later, you apply your test substance. You're going to repeat this exact same 1-2 punch on days 2, 3, and 7. Definitely memorize those specific application days, but equally important, you need to remember that days 4, 5, and 6 are strictly for resting. Literally nothing happens on those days. Finally, we reach day 8. The animals are humanely killed, we extract those lymph nodes, and we measure the ATP.
Now, take a look at the chemical equation that actually makes this whole 442A guideline tick. Basically, sensitizers induce the proliferation or multiplication of lymphocytes. More living cells means more adenosine triphosphate, or ATP. We use an enzyme from fireflies called luciferase to react with all that ATP. I like to use a fire alarm analogy here. Think of the sensitizing chemical applied to the ear as the fire. The proliferating lymphocytes in the lymph nodes, those are your firefighters rushing to the scene. The ATP they carry reacts in this equation to emit actual light, which acts as our siren. The brighter the light, the stronger the sensitization. Pretty cool, right?
Now, what's really fascinating, and definitely a prime target for test questions, is the super strict operational window you have on day 8. You extract the draining auricular lymph nodes bilaterally. That just means from both ears. Then, you literally crush them between glass slides to create a single-cell suspension. But here is the major kicker. This entire sequence, from snipping out those lymph nodes to getting your actual ATP light measurement, must be completed within 20 minutes. Why the rush? Because ATP degrades incredibly fast once the animal is sacrificed. If you dilly-dally and take too long, your siren loses power, your data is garbage, and the test is ruined.
Okay, moving on to Section 4. Let's talk about interpreting those results.
So we've got our light measurements. Now we've got to do a little math. The foundational concept here is the stimulation index, or SI. This is literally the most important metric of the entire guideline. It's actually a pretty simple ratio. You just take the mean relative luminescence units, or RLU, from your treated mice and divide it by the mean RLU of your concurrent vehicle control group. Basically, if your vehicle control group is the baseline, its SI is mathematically just 1. Your treated groups will be expressed as a ratio compared to that baseline.
I want you to highlight this next number in your notes, put stars around it, do whatever you need to do to remember it. 1.8. If the stimulation index you calculate for your test substance is 1.8 or greater, boom, you have a positive skin sensitization result. That is the magic threshold. That's the alarm bell that alerts regulatory bodies that a chemical is a potential hazard.
But as we all know, science is rarely just black and white. So be on high alert for trick questions on your exam regarding the borderline zone. If you get an ISI value that sits somewhere exactly between 1.8 and 2.5, the guideline explicitly warns us to tread carefully. This zone is totally notorious for false positives. You really have to stop and ask, is this substance an excessive skin irritant? Things like certain surfactants can cause inflammation that mimics sensitization. You also need to know if the chemical specifically messes with cellular ATP, like an ATP inhibitor. If it does, well, this specific assay might not even be appropriate to use at all.
All right, we're in the home stretch. Section 5, Key Takeaways.
We've covered a ton of ground today, from mouse demographics to firefly enzymes. Let's lock this into your brain before the exam. To master this guideline, just remember to turn on the LAMP. L stands for lymph nodes, specifically the draining auricular nodes right behind the ears. A stands for ATP, which we measure using bioluminescence, so we don't have to deal with radioactive waste. M stands for mice, exclusively the CBA/J strain, and they must be young adult females. And P stands for proliferation, which we calculate using that stimulation index, looking for a score greater than or equal to 1.8. Oh, and for some extra credit, do not forget that super strict 20-minute post-sacrifice time limit to measure your ATP. Seriously, memorize this LAMP mnemonic, and you're going to easily recall the target organ, the mechanism, the organism, and the mathematical limit when you're sitting in that exam room.
To wrap things up, I want to leave you with a bit of a provocative synthesis question just to test your understanding. Take a look at this data. Let's say an SI of 2.1 puts us right in that tricky borderline zone we talked about. But wait, we also have a 30% increase in ear thickness during the pre-screen. That completely breaches our 25% threshold for excessive local irritation. So the real question is, are those lymphocytes proliferating because of a true allergic sensitization, or are they just frantically rushing to repair a severe chemical burn? Being able to parse out the difference between a false positive caused by severe irritation and a true sensitizer, that's exactly what separates a good regulatory scientist from a great one. Think that over, review your notes, and best of luck studying. You've got this.